We're live. Welcome, everyone. You're watching Hard Targets, open source intel by the people, for the people, news from a multipolar world. This is Teray. We got an early show today because I always like those early shows. It's a little bit easier to do than 11 o'clock at night. Plus, I tend to find that more people come in. Maybe I'll start doing morning shows. Wouldn't that be fun? But as usual, before we get in to the news, just dropping the links in the chat. Follow me on Telegram at Hard Targets Intel because you never know when I'm going to be taken off of social media like YouTube, Twitter for talking about the news. And follow me on Twitter, my personal account, Iron Sun USA, because I am on Twitter more than I should be. Gonna be even during the month of Ramadan. I can't get off that social media app. Maybe for the last 10 days, but yeah, so you can find me there as well. In the meantime, yeah, let's get into it because there's a pretty big story happening today. I'm not sure if social media like YouTube and Twitter are going to be taking it down later on, so we will see. Obviously, the big story of the day was the shooting that happened this morning in Nashville, Tennessee. Big tragedy happening in the city, and it's always a tragedy whenever shootings like this occur. In a at a school, at an elementary school, with 3 children and 3 adults murdered by the shooter. So, just a moment of silence for everyone who was killed, for the parents of the children, for the families of everyone involved. It's important to have a moment of silence for them because this is only getting worse in the United States. Incidents like this, and they have been for a long time. And regardless of partisan positions, they are one thing we can agree on, no matter what side you are on the before you want to politicize it. The material fact is that these deaths, these murders by mass shooters, are preventable. That that's just a straight up fact. That it is ghoulish to try and politicize these shootings, that especially what liberals try to do, of make it an issue that needs to be brought into the chambers of Congress, that we need to pass legislation and we need to pass we need to change constitutional fabric of the United States in the wake of these tragedies, as they always do. But it is important to recognize that the one thing that we can all agree on is that these shootings are 100% preventable. The issue lies in where change, or the site of change, occurs. That is fundamentally the issue at hand. So, before we get into it, I'm just going to share. Just going to share the live stream to Twitter and to Telegram, just to get some people in here. Right. Yeah, in order to combat my ongoing laptop problem, I'm killing time sharing this link, so there's not just dead silence in my ongoing battle to keep my Wi-Fi secure, my computer from overheating. I am cooling computer on a frozen pizza. It's an old trick I learned when I was in college, rather than buying a new laptop, which is expensive. Who's gonna donate money? Who's gonna send some money to my Cash App account for me to get a new laptop? In the meantime, cooling my computer on a frozen pizza is a handy dandy solution. So hopefully my Wi-Fi is a little bit better for this video. Okay. All right. And then in other news, the a little update about the protests going on in Israel and France, like just those two protests that I had covered before in previous videos, which I highly encourage you to go back and watch those. But some updates about the protests in Israel, more so in Israel than in France. But there's just a conversation that needs to be had that I don't see people having about the protests happening in Israel that I also think is important to talk about. Welcome for those of you just joining us here. You're watching Hard Targets. I appreciate you. Uh, Make sure to follow me on Twitter and on my Telegram channel. But yeah, going to talk a bit about the protests happening in Israel, because I mean, obviously, I'm not going to go full schizophrenic and say that all of these events going on in the news today are related, but the general trend, I mean, liberalism being a hegemony, does produce trends because it has complete control over the fabric of society, over economic production, over our psychology, over values, and which is reproduced in the media and like in all this control over that social fabric. Uh, Trends emerge in within like hegemonic spheres, like the West in Europe and the United States. Um, so it's important to draw parallels where parallels can be drawn to prevent worst case scenarios like what's happening in France in the United States, to prevent things like that and to control their outcomes when they do happen. So to start off with, let's get into the news about the Nashville shooting. So earlier this morning, news broke that a shooting had happened at a Christian elementary school in Nashville, Tennessee. And like I had said, 3 children and 3 adults were killed. They were murdered by the shooter, and after the intervention by 5 police officers, those police officers then killed the shooter, who turned out to be 28-year-old Audrey Haley, who, as usually when events like this happen, the shooting happened like hours ago, and usually when this happens, the identity of the suspected shooter is released pretty quickly, as details come out, like details about, especially if they were killed in the firefight. Details like this tend to come out, at least you would expect they would. And it's only now within the past hour that any details have come out that the name of the suspect, Audrey Haley, who they were, potential motives, all of which is now just coming out. And people on Twitter are correctly pointing out that law enforcement, media, And everyone involved in covering the story is suppressing very key details that, under normal circumstances, would have been out by now. I mean, the fact that Audrey Haley is a woman, we'll get to that, is like a biological woman, is already a rare circumstance, very rare. Like biological women perpetrating mass shootings are around 1%, maybe less, but around 1% of mass shootings in the United States. On top of this, 28-year-old Audrey Haley also identified as transgender. This has been confirmed by the police. Again, 1%, 1 to 2% of the population within 1% of a demographic who commits mass shootings. Something as a 1% of 1% of 1%, 0.001. No, do I have that correct? No, 0.01%. Well, I mean, I don't even think we've been in this circumstance before, but you can already see the statistical outlier, how much of a drastic statistical outlier this is. Which makes it even more troubling that the media and law enforcement have gone through such lengths to delay details about Audrey. Presumably because they spent the entire day scrubbing her. Audrey identifies as transgender, as he, him, but we will not tolerate reaffirming mental illness on this channel. But yeah, presumably the delay was because law enforcement spent the entire day, the FBI, Nashville and Tennessee FBI, spent the entire day scrubbing Audrey's social media accounts of all, like LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, scrubbing all of her social media accounts of information, as they do. And this is not uncommon. We've seen law enforcement do this before. It makes it easier to spin a narrative when you have no details about the mentally ill people who commit these mass shootings. Which again, the fact that 1%, a 1% chance that this person would identify as transgender within a population who commits 1% of mass shootings makes it even more baffling. Well, not baffling if you know the motive, but even more disgusting. Yeah, I mean, why try and sound neutral about it? Even more disgusting that law enforcement, the FBI in particular, would scrub information from social media. Like, the fact that this is such an outlier means that if they were really interested in an investigation in trying to figure out, like why this happened and informing the population so that they can be fully informed of the dangers to them, to their families, if there's, if this person was connected to anyone. It makes it even more disgusting that they would scrub Audrey's social media accounts. There's troubling implications because when the profile of a mass shooter tends to be the same. Overwhelmingly men, and overwhelmingly white. Not all the time. That's not to say that always, uh, but again, typically, it becomes easy to fall into a pattern of thinking that isn't scientific, that isn't investigative. You tend to fall back on assumptions. Because again, I say typically that mass shooters in the United States fit this profile because, like, statistically speaking, there are a majority uh, white shooters. Not always. Again, there are black mass shooters, and histories of, again, typically histories of mental illness, seclusion, aggression, and again, overwhelmingly men, overwhelmingly. So it becomes easy to fall into patterns of thinking of, and when you fall into a pattern of thinking, you tend to prescribe motives to people and causes to these tragedies that aren't real, that are based on your conjecture, that are based on opinions. And then it becomes very easy, when you're already formulating these opinions, it becomes very easy for the media to spin those assumptions into a narrative that is convenient for them. For most shooters being men, and white men in particular, it becomes automatic for the media, the liberal media, to spin the tragedies in a political way, to say that all of these it becomes all, most becomes all mass shooters are white men, therefore we need to label conservative white men who carry guns. Overwhelmingly, like, conservative white men are the most likely to have guns. All of them should be labeled domestic terrorists because of the threat of stochastic terrorism. It's a word that popped up in the last couple of years, which is baloney. Like, that A is not effective, true, or constitutional. But it's an automatic spin that the media can do, because people, especially in liberal cities, will fall back on assumptions rather than investigate actual real motives, actual real conditions that produce this kind of mental illness, this kind of thinking, and how someone with mental illness can get access to a gun and is then allowed to walk into a school to shoot up children, and there's no interference. Because I don't know if the FBI knew beforehand that this person was a risk to themselves and others. I don't have the files. I couldn't tell you. If I had to guess, so the fact that there's no interference, yet again, means that this particular case is harder to spin. It is such an outlier. It is so hard to spin. Liberals need to, this time it is much harder for liberals to say that, it's about identity. It's about the identity of the shooter. It's harder to do that now that they are just left with this rhetoric, which on its face now, people recognize as unconstitutional, not factual, political, politicized. That being said, there are conditions within, the fact that this happened in Tennessee. There are trends to investigate. We'll do the job of the FBI for them, and we'll actually investigate. The fact that this happened in Tennessee is relevant because if you go on any mass shooting tracker online and you look through the cities where, I mean, it's just an alarming number, a very alarming number, like every day, just a mass shooting in a different city. Tennessee pops up a lot, like a lot. Not like, 50% or 90%, but you see, like, the name Tennessee pops up enough that you notice it's overrepresented in the number of mass shootings. And not just that, more pointedly, Tennessee also happens to be the place where two major bills got passed pushing back against the LGBT grooming phenomenon going on in America of grooming children for gender reassignment surgery and hormone replacement therapy through queer events like drag shows targeting kids. Tennessee, at the beginning of March, it was announced. Let me share my screen here since I'm cooling down my. Oh no, I don't think I can share my screen. Tragedy. Well, yeah, specifically, the two laws that had been passed. The first, banning gender affirming care, general gender affirming care for transgender youth, banning mutilation, surgical mutilation of children, is the real way to describe what's going on. And the second being that a law was passed for banning drag shows that target children in public spaces. Like, these two things in the liberal media have been characterized as an attack on LGBTQ people. And if you go on Twitter, it's not uncommon to see people talking about this specifically LGBT people on Twitter, saying that this is a genocide, that this is an attack against us. This is this is violence against trans people, which is telling. But those two things happening just a few weeks ago, and Tennessee being the site of this backlash from the liberal media and from the LGBT community in specific, means that when this mass shooting happened, the assumption in people's minds is that when such an outlier in mass shootings happens to be a transgender person, those two things, a high-profile media campaign to slander Tennessee lawmakers against a very present struggle between families and drag shows targeting kids, coupled with the fact that this shooter is transgender, is a hard relationship to ignore. It's an impossible relationship to ignore. And the fact that these events are so related means that new conclusions can probably be made based on what we already know. For example, the fact that the main pushback against these drag shows targeting kids is conservatives, and the fact that these targeting of kids is for the purposes of destroying nuclear families, destroying nuclear family structures, to introduce like this queer attack on family, attacking men and women, heterosexual, like in terms of their identity, to confuse them that way, to attack heterosexual relationships and having kids, to attack the family that way, and to attack the kids themselves by targeting them with grown men in drag, sexualizing these kids. Just a full-on assault against the family that makes you wonder, like, because it is such an obvious assault on the family structure, it's you know, makes conservatives, like, rational, uh, free-thinking conservatives, to ask themselves, where are the parents? Like, why aren't more parents pushing back? Why aren't more parents pushing back? Like, not just liberals, but parents. Like this deep biological instinct to protect your children and to raise them in such a way that when they are showing signs of distress and mental illness, depression, identity disorders, violence, aggression, when they are showing signs that you want to get rid of the causes of these symptoms, of these mental afflictions. Instead, we have parents encouraging this, and we have the media encouraging this. We have academic institutions and government institutions encouraging this. And now we see a result of this aggression, of this idea of people who are clearly mentally ill, who feel that they are being genocided by the government, who are once again targeting kids. You have to ask yourself, once again, where are the parents in these circumstances? I mean, that's why I titled the video. That's why I titled the video the reason I titled it. Like, where are the parents in Nashville? Like, lawmakers can, pass these bills banning, grown men doing drag shows in front of kids and sexualizing kids in that way, and they can, lawmakers can ban the surgical mutilation of children, and they should, as they should. This is a correct thing to do. That is what the state is for, to protect the citizenship from that kind of degeneracy. But there is a deeper problem when, at the basic social level, the basic unit of society, of civilization, like the family unit, there is a deeper problem when that basic unit, the family, and parents who lead families are not pushing back against this kind of mental illness, against this kind of aggression. The fact that lawmakers pass this kind of bill, the fact that this bill needs to be passed in the first place, rather than it being a basic assumption, like a basic human assumption, that parents should not encourage their kids to get mutilated chemically or surgically, that parents should not be bringing their kids into cabaret shows where grown men are shaking their ass. That is like a basic human instinct. And the fact that it is degraded so much that there need to be laws in place to stop this from happening is a problem. A problem which has metastasized so much that it has led to this kind of tragedy of one of these people like a person with, you know, who identifies as transgender, someone who is clearly unwell, getting armed and shooting up kids. So this is no longer an instance of saying that there are no consequences to allowing a very tiny minority of the population to be this aggressive. There is no more, there is no higher authority than the state to push back against this kind of aggression. Instead, liberal media spin has become, we need to take away your constitutional rights to defend yourself. We need to get rid of guns. A mentally ill person who uh, would have gotten a gun went up and shot a school and committed a devastating act. The city of Nashville is now reeling from a tragedy. And we should take away your constitutional rights because of that. No, no, no. Pause. Pause. There. And to be clear, one of the first videos I saw when I was digging through when I was digging through videos to see confirmation of the identity of the shooter, Audrey Hale. I'm gonna. I wish I had the ability to share my screen. I'm not sure. I'm not sure I can from YouTube. That's what I get for not using StreamYard. But the video has gotten has been seen several million times at this point. So if you just search Nashville shooter, it'll probably come up. A live stream from Fox News. No, not Fox News. Where's the other video? No, it is Fox News. A live stream from Fox News was giving a police report on the shooting, and a woman just bursts onto the camera and starts and just takes over the live feed. Just nobody stops her. And this is happening on live camera, and she's saying that I'm a mother. I'm a survivor of a mass shooting, and I'm from Illinois. She's from a completely different state. And she's saying all this. I am a survivor of a mass shooter from Illinois, and I came here to Nashville on vacation with my son. And now and I have to go through this traumatizing event again. Pause. So again, for a mass shooting with a perpetrator who had a 0.01% chance of being a transgender person, like a woman identifying as a man, 0.01% chance of that happening. Now a woman who was from a completely different state, who, in her words, has been lobbying for months and months, talking to hundreds of lawmakers about trying to take away guns, is in the exact state this happened, on the exact day, in the exact position where mainstream media cameras are filming live. That is insane. That is wild. That defies all logic. Such an event would be considered a miracle if it wasn't like a tragedy. It would be a scientific it would be considered a scientific miracle if it wasn't a tragedy, like a horrible series of deaths. So the whole thing, in that particular instance, just feels so staged that, the fact that it's happening when 6 people died, again, confirms my, suspicion that the FBI knew this person was mentally ill, knew they were a threat to other people, and just, and rather than interfering, which is the job of law enforcement, just rather set up a woman with connections to lawmakers to be on live TV and to speak to an audience of millions of people about taking away their constitutional rights and appealing to their emotions to take away their constitutional rights. And like destroying the instinct in people, in parents, to push back against this kind of aggressive behavior from the pronoun people. That it's you who's at fault, actually, for allowing your allowing yourself to have the constitutional right to carry guns, rather than your responsibility as a parent to be making sure that your kids aren't like aggressively trying to push LGBT propaganda down people's faces and shoot them if they if they disagree with you. The whole staged feeling of it. Because if it's not staged, that's wild. That would be wild if it wasn't staged. Whether or not it was is still slimy. But weaponizing a tragedy that didn't even affect you or your son. Other people's kids were killed. The sliminess of that. Bad enough, like people who politicize like their own tragedy to take away the constitutional rights in order to allegedly defend a minority. They're perceived as defending very, very small minority. That allowing them to continue to be mentally ill is seen as protecting them. Very slimy. Very slimy already when it doesn't involve tragedy. So how did the and yeah, so that's honestly, I think, something that we need to see more of is bringing back. Yeah, I do appreciate lawmakers who push back, but we need to bring back that basic instinct of of parents, of the basic structural unit of society, of the family, pushing back against this kind of uh, behavior. That's one of the trends. This LGBTQ attack on the family. Which when I speak of trends, like in the beginning of the video, when I speak of trends of liberalism, fits into the larger trend of degrowth. That human reproduction, human families uh, are are evil things. That having more people on the planet is an evil thing, that we are somehow to blame for the that we are somehow to blame for the climate, for and that or the only way that we can appease the weather gods is by making sure that hundreds of millions of people die, whether through war or famine or plague. It is the mere act of people dying is a net benefit for the degrowth Malthusian people. That it might be a tragedy, but it is a greater sacrifice necessary to appease Mother Gaia, who is angry at us for populating. Like the LGBT propaganda campaign to attack the family, in this case, literally to attack the family, is part of that degrowth agenda. which is another reason I want to talk. I want to give updates about the Israel protests. Is Yeah, there's been a lot of talk on Telegram that Netanyahu has been thinking of escalating the conflict, of which makes sense. He's on the verge of civil war. Like, members of the military are defecting and refusing to do their jobs of defending the country. Not that I support Israel at all. I don't. But that if I was the leader of a country, that would be a concern when a large part of the military is refusing to do their jobs. That's the conditions for a civil war, especially when millions of people are taking to the streets to protest your regime. So there's been talks that Netanyahu is going to be like escalating that conflict. Not to say of what that would look like in actuality, but while on the surface, how people are like the New York Times and all them and all the liberal mainstream media are talking about how Netanyahu is being congratulated for rolling back his parliamentary reforms to centralize more power under himself. That there are alleged leaks, that he is thinking of cracking down anyway. That his population should be crushed. That if he cannot enact legal centralization of power, he will enact illegal centralization of power and crack down on the population in retaliation for pushing back against the parliamentary reforms. And again, parliamentary reforms for centralizing power under the Israeli genocidal government, which has been like attacking, which is just destabilizing the entire region, which has been bombing Syria, which has been attacking and jailing Christians. That's another unrecognized. That's another unignorable and clearly recognizable pattern, by the way, that relates the shooting that happened in Nashville to the to what's going on in Israel right now. If you're not paying attention, a clear trend of these regimes attacking Christians in a very noticeable way now in the United States, where these where like that, and I don't know if I had mentioned it before, but Audrey Haley, like the school, she had gone to that school. She was previously a student at that school when she was in elementary school, and it's a Christian school. It's a Christian, a private school, I believe. I know there's a tuition you need to pay to get into this Christian school, but yeah, that's kind of hard to ignore. The fact that a big part of LGBT propaganda is being against Christianity, religion in general, but in America, Christianity specifically, because a lot of these people come from Christian families. We are a Christian country, after all. So that's kind of hard to ignore. Coupled with the fact that countries like Israel and Ukraine are targeting Christians, Zelensky evicting monks, like priests, from a church that they had built decades and decades ago and had been living there and preserving the estate for decades, that they had built, just prosecuting them. Ukraine overall, in having many instances of attacking priests, many of them being killed by the government. And now in Israel, them passing a law jailing Christians for evangelizing Christianity, for just talking to Jews about being a Christian could be considered evangelizing, for which you would be jailed. Um, so the population at large, pushing back against sweeping parliamentary reforms, but Netanyahu just deciding to crack down anyway, allegedly. I wouldn't be surprised if he did, because even if he doesn't, the laws like the jailing of Christians being passed, and then the bombing of the Aleppo airport a couple of days ago, it means that it doesn't really matter if he rolls back these parliamentary reforms. Like, the escalation of conflict is happening regardless. So if they're not going to be happening, like, in a sweeping reform overnight, they're already here. Like, the effects of them are already here. It is to destroy the foundations of functional, thriving, like regional communities, to bomb them, to throw religious, like Christians, like in jail, to target people of other religions, to destabilize the very foundations of a stable society. The things that prevents the kind of disturbed individuals, like you see, like Nazis joining the Ukrainian, like Azov battalion, or Nazi mercenaries from New Zealand and Canada and the United States and Japan, joining as mercenaries to fight for Ukraine, to fight for degeneracy, and the Ukrainian degeneracy of Zelensky's government. The kinds of like stable foundations of a society that prevents sick individuals like Audrey Haley from going and shooting up kids. An attack against the family, an attack against Christianity, an attack against basic constitutional values. Again, not that the Israeli government ever respected constitutional values. It's a fake country. It's a degrowth, like attacking the things that allow the flourishing, the growth of society, economic production. If you want to like attack that, you drop bombs on it, like Israel is doing in Syria. I don't see any of these protesters being against the bombing of Syria or the bombing of any other countries, the number of times that it happens. But it's only when the crackdowns are happening to them that people cry fascism. That's the historical trend. Fascism being the crackdown of an internal population that you do to the colonies. Degrowth. You bomb industry, hospitals, airports, roads, houses, to make life miserable for people. So not only are you killing people, but the people who you haven't killed, life is unbearable for them. You attack their religion, the sites of their ethics and psychic stability and values. You attack the family, another structure to instill like values in people and to keep that sort of moral growth and physical reproduction going. You attack those things for the sake of maintaining power for a few individuals, for a few Malthusian Nazi individuals. That is like a trend. Like degrowth is the ultimate trend, really, of liberalism of the past, few years, of the past, few decades since the United States taking over of the New World Order. Arguably, the trend since the rise of liberalism as a means to promote as an ideology promoting capitalism, like capitalism being degrowth, in that it causes permanent underdevelopment and destruction of colonial countries, or colonized countries, enforcing permanent degrowth on them for the sake of maintaining a colonial pipeline that feeds the metropole, the centers of Western power. The degrowth being the big trend of like the liberal sphere of the world. This anti-human hatred of the traditions and structures that keep us alive and functioning and happy and healthy, even to the point of it being your own population, which is what fascism is. That same degrowth, hatred that you instill against the colonies, against your own population, that we're seeing in France and in Israel. And that's the last thing I want to talk about, is I don't see anybody comparing the French and Israel protests, even though they were kicked off on the same circumstances of these leaders enacting ostensibly like fascist parliamentary reforms, centralizing power under under the executive, and taking away the checks given that are supposed to be given by Parliament. The same thing, same time. That is so. Why is no one talking about even favorably? I don't even see anyone talking about that favorably in the same sense, let alone critically. People might be critical of the Israeli protests, saying that Israel is criticized. Israel is protesting against these parliamentary reforms, but they never protest against like the bombing of Gaza. I mean, the same is true of France. Like the base layer, the rioters, the millions of people taking to the streets to protest, these parliamentary reforms as de facto being legitimate by their rioting, like the cause that they are rioting for being legitimate, just it has always been astroturfed. It has always been part of that degrowth agenda. I mean, the video I have here on Twitter, and I retweeted it on my own Twitter account, which is another reason why you should go follow me. Yeah, of the protesters chanting, pensions and climate, same fight. No retirees on a burned planet. And that video has been seen 14,000 times. The tweet itself seen 40,000 times. So this being a part of the French protests, that same degrowth climate, green fascism. In France, they're protesting because they're raising the pension age from 62 to 64, which isn't that an extreme of a change for 4 million people to be burning down their country. But it's ultimately, you can see, because slogans like this can be like popularized, the concern is not that, we're going to be working until we die, because 64 is not when you're going to die. No one in these industrialized nations thinks that retiring at 64 is unreasonable. In the United States, it's 65. And people are working even into their 70s. Now, not that we want to work until their 70s, but on paper, we're supposed to be retiring at 65, and that's normal. And the same in China. People are working longer. France is just, it's not like France is an industrial powerhouse of Europe that is such a bastion of industry that it can allow people to retire. No, this is another degrowth agenda. Pensions and climate being related. That that's you can't retire on a burned planet, and so we should reduce industry. We should reduce the number of workers. We should reduce the number of people in the workforce, either by in the case of Israel, by bombing people, by bombing industry. Sorry about the vacuum, by the way, if you can hear that. Or like in countries where you can't outright just bomb your own population, because we haven't gotten to that point yet. Who knows if we will? But instead, just promote like astroturfing these riots, saying that we should reduce the number of workers in the economy. We should reduce, like, no. People, like, the readiness that people have to defend these riots, who may correctly condemn like the degrowth agenda, don't relate this to the degrowth agenda. Oh, because it's France, because it's the birthplace of the Jacobin revolution, and this is a revolution. Finally, revolution is happening in Europe, and they don't see it as connected to the degrowth agenda of shrinking industry, of reducing the number of work. You want more workers. You want more workers in the economy. You want more workers in your country. You want more workers. Like, yeah, Macron is a neoliberal shill. That doesn't mean you should be burning down businesses. Again, destroying the economy for the sake of shrinking the economy. That's crazy. That's crazy. That is just another part of the degrowth agenda that I see nobody connecting. I see none of the dots being connected. Yeah, it sucks if you live in France and you don't want to work 2 years longer. Would you rather have your economy go back to pre-electricity levels of output? Because coming back from that is more difficult. Coming back from an economy that's like being destroyed is much more difficult than the reverse of growing an economy from where you are currently. When you lose that infrastructure, when you lose that population, when you lose that momentum, picking it up again is magnitudes harder, levels of magnitude harder, and creates a downward spiral rather than an upward spiral. We should be, like, if you really wanted to see change in your country, if you really wanted to see change, and you believe that the salt of the earth, working class majority, is the means of bringing about change, is the true representative of authority, that state power should be representing the majority, the working majority, the rights of the nation to survive and be sovereign and self-sufficient. You should want more people in the working class. Yeah, you can protest against like the raising of or I mean, you can protest the neoliberalism of Macron, and you can protest the centralization of executive authority. But over this specifically, over the raising of, because it's over the raising of the retirement age from 62 to 64, that's what makes people mad. Is just more of the same liberalism. It's just the French population wanting to depose of Macron for ending the Franc-Afrique foreign policy of looting France's former colonies, specifically Lebanon and Mali and Burkina Faso. Burkina Faso and Mali, which have evicted the French embassies. So they don't have the access to those resources to steal anymore. And this is why we're seeing like the French neoliberal government crunch those numbers now. They're enforcing austerity on people. Not really enforcing austerity on people. It's an austerity enforced upon themselves. The French working people could have increased their own industry. They didn't have to wait for the government to increase their own industry. They don't have France doesn't have like natural resources to exploit. That's why so much of the country is run on nuclear power, because they don't have the resources available. You should be wanting more people in the working population to industrialize, to make it easier to industrialize. You should want more people, even if it means you have to retire later. It means that when the time comes that the government is acting against you, you have the economic capacity to resist them, and to resist the collapse of your country. That's insane to me. Destroying your economy for the goal of shrinking the economy. Anyway, and so that's an update about the protests going on. I just want I needed to talk about that relationship, because hopefully I see more people making that connection, because that kind of austerity is coming to the United States, and I don't want to see that kind of insanity reproduced here. So that's really the two main topics I had to talk about. And yeah, so those of you tuning in after the live stream, thank you so much for clicking on the video. Again, my name is Teray. You've been watching Hard Targets. I fully encourage you to follow me on Telegram. Again, the link's in the comment section. Hard Targets Intel on Telegram, and Iron Sun USA on Twitter. So go and give me a follow. Let's keep the conversation going. Let's see if we can start making people connect these dots. So for now, I'll be tuning out, because that's all I got. Peace.